I'm going to be doing the devotion today based on one of the passages from Sunday's lectionary on the first Passover. And it's Exodus 12, 1 through 14. And rather than read all of it through, I'm going to give you the last sentence of the story. This day shall be a day of remembrance for you. You shall celebrate it as a festival of the Lord. Throughout your generations, you shall observe it as a perpetual ordinance. If any advertisement ever chose the most perfect song to go with its product, it was the ad for Staples several years ago that took the Christmas song, "It's the Most Wonderful Time of the Year," as a back-to-school song. The parents are dancing in the aisles at Staples, tossing backpacks and binders into their school carts, while the children look as if they're walking to the gallows. It's back to school time, the most wonderful time of the year, unless you are, as Shakespeare put it, the whining schoolboy with his satchel and glowing face, moving like a slug to school. Somehow it is reassuring to know that even in Shakespeare's time, the end of summer and the return to class didn't always mean bright and cheerful faces. This year's school year will be different, as so much has been. Children and their teachers will be engaging in distance learning with both the benefits and the trials it begets. College students who have returned to campus will be spending the year in the library studying and avoiding both the Greek scene and bars and pool halls. At least that's the theory the various college presidents and chancellors hope will happen. For alumni whose graduation years are divisible by 5, there will be no homecoming except maybe virtually, and no opportunity until another 5 years later to see how old your classmates have become. You, of course, have matured but not aged and are within 5 pounds of your college weight. Some people were never very good with math. Education will be hard. Teaching will be difficult. It offers new terrain, new possibilities, and new opportunities, both for success and failure. There are 2 stories specifically in the Bible that are critical educational tools for who we are in the world. The first is the story of Passover. The second is a more modern telling of a different Passover, that of the Last Supper. Moses and Aaron have received word from God that he's done playing around with plagues which have not moved the Pharaoh to set the Israelites free. He tells them that all the Israelites on this specific night are to take a year-old male goat or lamb, roast it, eat it in their sandals, and with their cloak wrapped around them as if they're about to leave. They are to take the blood from the animals and place it on their doorposts as a sign to the angel of death to pass over the house. They are to eat bitter herbs. Their bread is unleavened. Most importantly, God commands the Israelites to celebrate this every year. Later on in Leviticus, more detail is given. This is the day that the Lord commands them to commemorate. This is the beginning of the flight towards freedom. In the readings of Passover, the story is told each year. The youngest child in the family asks, "What makes this night different from every other night?" And the story begins again. The child is taught why they have the lamb, why the bitter herbs and the salty water, why the bread is unleavened. It's not because it's something in the book that they need to know for the exam, as it were. Rather, it tries to put the child and all members of the community back into the time of their forefathers. The salt water represents the bitter tears shed, the harisset, the walls and buildings we were asked to make of bricks without straw. The bread was unleavened because we didn't have time for it to rise before we would have to make our escape from Egypt. Ideally, the story and the education becomes something so deeply ingrained that it becomes part of who that person is within the community and with God. I celebrate Passover, says the child, because I am free and God desires me to stay free. A good teacher will get the facts across. A great teacher with the right student will find the student asking questions: why? What if? How? Carl Sagan wrote that when he was taking his orals for his doctorate in astronomy, the first question he got was, why is the sky blue? Orals are physically and emotionally exhausting. Why is the sky blue is a question a 5-year-old would ask. Sagan began to relax. It's a 5-year-old question. He gave the answer: the refraction of light in the atmosphere. Why does it refract? How does it refract? What happens if? By the time he was done with his orals, he'd covered light and atomic physics, quantum mechanics, relativity, cosmology, relativity, good old-fashioned astronomy, and a range of other topics. A good teacher can take a question, and with it, a good student can discover the secrets of the universe. Likewise, by taking the story of Passover, participants can ponder on the question of why did God choose this small, rather insignificant tribe to lead to freedom? What does freedom look like? How can we provide freedom to those who are lacking it? Why are we so inclined to turn away from freedom for the false security of slavery? Why Moses? Why anyone? Perhaps one reason why God chose Moses was that most people wouldn't have put up with the complaining of the 40-year trek in the wilderness. The desire to return to the comforts of Egypt and slavery were compelling when you weren't sure where your next meal was coming from, or when you were just really, really tired of manna. They were distracted by bright and shiny things that caused them to take their eyes away from God. And it's no different for us. We too get distracted by the things of the world and find false comfort in the things of this world. We too turn away from God and head towards slavery to some false god. There is a similar story which we as Christians commemorate that involves a pure lamb sacrificed on our behalf. When we celebrate communion, it is an opportunity for us to be re-educated and reminded. In our liturgy, we retell the Passover meal Jesus had with his disciples. He had the same meal generations of his people had going back to Egypt. He was part of a line of educators. He tried to teach his disciples, but sometimes the students weren't ready for the lessons the teacher gives them. This is why he commanded us to take communion. 2, as the altars of many Christian churches state, to do this in remembrance of me. Jesus' death and resurrection provides us with a means of grace to escape the tyranny of sin and death. As the story becomes incorporated in our lives, we find ourselves asking questions. Who is my neighbor? What must I do to be saved? Where is God leading me? What are the spiritual gifts God has given me for the furtherance of his kingdom? And what wondrous love is this, O my soul, to send the King of bliss for my soul? We need to remember the stories both as a physical rescue from slavery and as a spiritual rescue as well. This is why, when we take communion, we can well and truly ask, what makes this meal different from all of the others? Amen.